Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wandering DMs. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dan, and on this episode of Wandering DMs, we have very special guest Luke Gygax, who's currently planning for Gary Con XIII later this month. Luke, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Luke has so many stories that I felt really bad that we had to cut him off before we, as we actually got online here. I'll also remind viewers that we are presented today with the help of our friends at dscribe.com with a special offer for viewers, but more on that at the end of the show. So, of course, Luke, the main thing that we want to talk to you about today is the preparations for Gary Con XIII that's happening in the end of the month. I think that's March 25th through 28th, I think. And the big question I'm sure on everybody's mind is this year, do we get to be in person or is it online?
So my initial plan was, of course, to have a physical convention. I thought we would beat COVID by this time and we'd all be able to gather together. But unfortunately, as everybody knows, the fall and the winter really took a bad turn. And so I had to call off a physical convention. We're all 100% virtual or ethereal. So Gary Con is in ethereal form this year. We're not able to go to material Gary Con. However, we've got this down pretty good at this point, running the virtual side of it. We've all had a lot of practice. We've got some great people who are doing it last year. And for 12, we shifted inside of 2 weeks. And we had 2,000 people participate and about 600 events. This year, we have over 850 events. Tickets are still available. We got plenty of cool events. Adventures League came out huge. My friend Thomas Valley has 5 brand new adventures written specifically for Gary Con. There'll be exclusives to Gary Con and be published available afterwards if you can't make it for some reason. But yeah, so hop on to play.garycon.com and get yourself a badge.
Awesome. I'm curious. Like, so having done it twice now, were there any like big lessons you learned from 12 that you're changing things for 13 at all?
Well, yes. What we did is we've got people registering earlier, so we're opening up registration this month, so people get some direct mail, so they can come in, link their badge, pick up their badge, link it with their Discord ID. So we can rapidly communicate with them through Discord so that they can find their events, or, hey, I'm the DM, oh geez, I got to change where I'm doing this or whatever. We can get in touch with those people rapidly and they won't miss their event. There won't be all that confusion because there's a lot of churn. There was a ton of confusion. I mean, I don't know about you guys were probably very savvy and had been using, virtual gaming systems and VTTs a bunch. I wasn't. I was a little resistant to the idea, but I've had to embrace it a bit more because I wanted to game. And how else are we gonna keep that community and that camaraderie other than doing this? And so I know many people prefer to be in person. We prefer to be able to, have a spotted cow beer. That's the official beer of Gary Con. Well, there's a reason why. So Gygax is a Swiss name, right? So it's Gygax in Switzerland, and it's actually pretty common around the Bern area. There's a ton of them, but in the United States, there's very few of us. Pretty much, you're probably related to me if your name is Gygax. Yes, I'm not kidding. Yeah, there's only one time. There's one time I met someone who recognized my name, and I'm going, okay, here we go. He's going to say, is your dad Gary Gygax? He's like, are you related to Frank Gygax? I was like, no, I'm not. He's like, oh, he owns a farm up there. I was like, okay. It was in California, so up in Northern California. So I was like, oh, nope, honestly, I'm not. And I just let it go. So it was kind of cool. But it's a Swiss name, and so we grew up in I grew up in Lake Geneva, and there's a Swiss town called New Glarus in eastern Wisconsin. So we'd go there for the William Tell Festival. We'd go have Landjäger and Rüsti and Schnitzel and all sorts of good Germanic foods and watch the William Tell Festival. And the New Glarus Brewery my dad enjoyed going to the New Glarus Brewery and eating in their kitchen, their Ratskeller and that sort of stuff. So and he had a shirt that said like Swiss Power and had a Swiss flag on it. It's silly. And, William Tell Festival. So that was just something we did, as a family. And so when my father passed away, and we started holding, Gary Con, in case folks don't know, Gary Con is a memorial convention held in honor of my father, Gary Gygax, who was the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons. It was published in 1974. He worked on it, was exposed to it in about 72 with Dave Artisan and fantasy game, and then kind of merged and put rules and packaged it all together in 73. And there was a whole saga to get it published, obviously, but it finally came out in 74. So it's been around for a minute. But when my father passed away in 2008, it was a very, obviously, horrible event. If anyone who's lost a parent can kind of understand how that is. And it really hits you like just a ton of bricks, right? You feel like you're in those days. And what my family and I found is, and I was honestly surprised by it, is just how many people reached out by email or phone calls. I was in recruiting command at the time, and find my number, and just some people would call the day or day after my father died, and of course I answered it because it's my job. But they'd say, "Hey, I didn't expect you to answer. I just wanted to leave a message. Your father was a huge impact on me, and with some other officer in the California Guard." And it was just amazing. So that thousands of emails, people just driving to Lake Geneva. Yeah. They didn't necessarily know us, but they just drove to Lake Geneva on a pilgrimage. And I was like, okay. So I knew my dad created the role-playing game genre, and he was a pretty big influencer on how classic adventures and rule sets, and that influenced some things, but I didn't realize the extent of the cultural influence, and I didn't realize the great impact it had on many individuals, the good it had done. And that's one of the reasons why I'm such a big proponent, getting out and gaming, advancing the power of role-playing gaming and the positive aspects of it, and trying to carry on my father's legacy because of the positive impact that gaming brings to people. And just for instance, and there may be people watching who had these sorts of experiences, I heard a guy who helps me with Gary Con, actually. I was asking him, "Hey man, why do you do so much work? You do a lot of events, a lot of virtual events. You help out with a lot of virtual events, including Gary Con." And he said, "Well, I was a 13-year-old kid. I was in a tough spot, had some family problems at home, and I went to go talk to your dad, and you could see something was wrong in my eyes. Some event had happened, and he was a little impacted. And so my dad spotted that when he was signing his book, and he's like, 'Hey kid, hey, you want to go? Let's go sit down and chat for a minute.'" And being a parent, he had 5 kids at that time. He just sat him down and talked to him, and cheered him up, made sure everything was okay. He signed his book. He said, "Hey, what's your address? I'll send you a little gift pack or whatever it is." And sure enough, he stuck to his word. He sent him a bunch of cool stuff. And then every year, this person would come to Gen Con and would talk to him, and he'd reintroduce himself, and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, so I remember you." And like the 6th or 7th year, he's now an adult. He's like, "Did you really just introduce yourself to me again? Come on, we've been doing this every." He's like, "Well, I know you meet so many people." He's like, "No," and so they corresponded a little bit, and they kept in touch, and that was so impactful to him and helped him out so much. He's become a huge advocate. Also role playing and being able to escape from what was a negative environment temporarily, and to feel empowered and to be somebody else for a bit of time helped. Other kids, young people, would see the artwork, or they would see somebody playing. They'd be like, "This looks really cool." They might have had some sort of learning disability, whatever that may be. Yeah. And so it was very frustrating to try to learn, scholastic stuff at school. But man, I really want to do this. So they would put the hours in to be able to read those books. And of course, if anyone's read like AD&D, which was my dad's favorite system, is kind of, what his kind of magnus opus. It's written in high Gygaxian, I think is what some people say. So he liked, he liked to use words that were not well known because he wanted you to stretch when you read the book. And he said words have specific meanings, and there's more specific words that are going to make it sound, which are going to communicate my idea more exactly. And plus, he just liked, he liked big college words. So, on
that point. I think about, so 2 weeks back, Paul and I had a show where we were discussing DM's guides, like through different editions, actually. And part of that discussion, as I was saying, your father's AD&D DM's guide is the single book that I've read the most. And at the time, I absolutely said that it completely shaped my vocabulary and my writing style. And personally playing D&D, and for me, analyzing the probability and the strategy and statistics. You fast forward from when I was a teenager to a little bit later, I'm like, oops, I'm a professor of mathematics, and that kind of accidentally happened from analyzing your father's works, actually. And obviously, everybody says that your father was incredibly generous with his time, and that anecdote there was a pretty good one. At some point, I never met your father in person, but at some point, I got his email address. And asked him a couple of questions by email, and he very generously and very warmly replied with full answers. And even the time, I think I was thinking to myself, if I was advising Mr. Gygax, I would have said, "Don't spend time on that. What are you doing? That's not a good use of your time." Responding to individual emails, but nonetheless, he always had time for individual people when they presented themselves to him, which to this day is like really astounding to me.
Yeah, he strove to answer. Yeah, that was important to him to answer every email, because he would say, "I'm a gamer. I'm just a gamer who created a game and you guys like it." But he didn't think that he was, superior in some way to other folks, and so you would be deserving of respect. I also think he didn't get out of the house as much later on in his life. He had some health issues, and it was just hard to get out and travel as much, and it cost money. So I think he found this connection. The internet was just a wonderful blessing to him. So he could chat and have these conversations with people, as opposed to having to face them or do it by mail. If you remember, he came out of the 60s and 70s, where he would do a lot of play by mail, all the correspondence on rules and stuff by mail. Telephone calls used to cost money. If you remember that. It'd be like 50 cents or $1 a minute, right, to call long distance. That was no joke. That was You have to remember, we were very poor, and so a couple of things you talked about, the tables in there and how that stimulated you in statistics and that sort of thing. So my father was an insurance underwriter at Fireman's Fund Insurance, and he was fired in, I think, October of 1970, 1 month before I was born. And my mom agreed with him that he should pursue his dream of writing, and as a way to kind of bring in enough income to keep his family of 5 going, he bought some shoe repair equipment from a family. The gentleman had just passed away, and his son didn't want to be a shoe repairman. And so my dad got the equipment, put it in the basement, and he did repair and wrote a lot of stuff. And that's how he's able to write D&D. But all the tables and that sort of stuff, the probabilities came out of wargaming. When you fire this millimeter cannon at the front slope of an armor that's so thick, what's the chance it's going to pierce, right? How about the side, the back? And they realized, well, 2d6 only gives you certain probability curves, and so they had to use different types of dice, and that's the whole dice thing is very as well. So that's another rabbit hole we can go down. But yeah, he was an insurance underwriter. So that's where he got a lot of that stuff. And he was generous with his time because he loved it. He loved to play games. Just as for instance, people would come by and knock on his door at 316 Madison Street, where he used to live in Lake Geneva, and they'd say, "Hi, are you Gary Gygax?" He'd be on the porch, writing. He'd have his bird goggles there, his book, or his binoculars and bird book, and his ashtray and several books spread out. And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, sure. Hi, what's going on?" He's like, "Oh, I'm a big fan." He's like, "Well, come on in, have a cup of iced tea or whatever." And then you'd rap with him, and if if he was short a person in his game, he'd be like, "Well, do you want to play on Thursdays?" He brought in like 5 or 6 people that way. I'm not even kidding. Yeah, and so that's how people would come into the gaming group. And yeah, so he was very down to earth. He wasn't pretentious.
If I can ask, Luke, I'm kind of curious. Something I've always kind of wondered about is just like, how big were those games? I think Dan and I often kind of chuckle over the line in the original edition that says that it's for up to 50 players. We're like, really? Were there 50 people? Like, how big were these games?
No, I don't know. That's. I never saw him run a 50-person game. That seems like he might have gotten that one wrong. All right, yeah, he might have gotten that one wrong. The biggest group I ran for, I think, was 24 people, and that was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And you really got to be you've got to just be ruthless in when you're going around the table. Like, what are you doing? Well, okay, great. That's what you're doing. How about you? You better, like, you need to tell me or you're done. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
So it was third edition, so it was like, oh my gosh.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Like, on that point, actually, was it always, like the games that your father or you run, like, was it always literally around the table, or do you do this, like, third, fifth edition thing where everybody's got their own number?
Oh,
in your preference?
No. Yeah, pretty much it was party initiative for the most part, unless there could be some rare occasions where maybe you're on separate areas or it's going to be really important, then he might break it down. But typically it was group initiative with a D6, and you could use, sometimes we'd use dex adjustment now.
Gotcha. Interesting.
It's more simplified. So people ask about like weapon speed factors, if we're talking AD&D, if you remember, that was one of the charts in there, right? So he included that for the war gamers who were griping about, well, that's not realistic. This kind of pole arm would cut this armor more easily. So he's like, okay, or it's slower or whatever. He's like, okay, here's all this stuff for you guys, but we never.
I was just looking, actually, it's funny because I was just writing a blog about that last night. I was inspecting that very table kind of closely last night. So if for followers of my blog, in 2 weeks, they're going to see a fairly large blog post on exactly what Luke was talking about. So thank you for bringing that up. So I noticed in the chat, for some reason, we have a chat of apparently everybody's in Toronto, Canada, is what I see today. And, I kind of bring it back to Gary Con a little bit. There is a silver lining because, there are some people that have wanted to participate in Gary Con for many years, but maybe the travel is super difficult. And I had an online friend from Scotland, and the only time I ever met him in person a number of years ago is he was traveling through New York on the way from Scotland to Gary Con specifically, and talking about all the amazing things he was going to do at Gary Con and all the amazing people he was going to meet. And I see, actually, John Scott is in the chat right at the moment, and we were talking on the AD&D Facebook group earlier this morning about even going from Toronto to, Gary Con in person would be difficult. So do you find there are some people like last year, this year, that are getting to participate for the first time because it's virtual? Is that like a little bit of a silver lining?
That is. And I think Gary Con is global this year, so there's no reason. And I've been saying that. We started streaming yesterday during the March to Gary Con every Saturday. We're streaming on Gary Con Gaxmore channel. And it's really just to spread the word, let people know. And I try to post out on social media, everything. There's no reason, there's no limit. Come to Gary Con. We got plenty of events. We're happy to take you. Please join in the celebration. I'm able to, my friend Heath Farndon from Australia came to Gary Con 8. He's wanted to come back ever since. He was going to come this year, but he couldn't do it, so, and that's a heck of a trip from Australia. But he just had such a wonderful time. He's been dying to come back. And we have people who come from, like another guy comes from Thailand, another guy from Russia, several from England, all over, who actually make that journey to come, Italy as well, to come to Gary Con. That's hard. I understand that's very difficult. I plan on keeping the virtual aspect going, so that maybe people can come every other year, every third year. But yes, by all means, we have people running events 24. I think we got 24 hours. We got some people in Europe, some people in Australia. Come play. And if you're in another area of the world, plan on running events in your time zones for your local groups or your folks in whatever language you prefer to run. Because D&D is in, I don't know how many languages, but lots and lots, I imagine. It doesn't have to be in English. It doesn't have to be in the United States. There's nothing about that. Gaming is global. Welcome everybody. And I think the more people who are gathering together, celebrating, and remembering kind of who my dad was and the positive aspects of D&D and other role-playing games, what we've done for our culture worldwide. Happy to do it. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. I should have mentioned that. We're around the clock. We're global. There's no restriction.
I'm kind of curious. I think I heard you mention are you planning next year to continue to have some virtual component even if the main event is in person and live?
Oh yeah, we better be able to get a person next year, man. I tell you what, it is a lot of work putting together a convention, whether it's physical or virtual. There's challenges each way. It's a lot of work, and I'm very fortunate to have some folks who dig in and help me each and every year. And it's essentially volunteer work, because whatever I can pay them to do it, it's not worth their time. I mean, you'd make more, bagging groceries probably than working for Gary Con. So it's not glamorous, but the payoff is being able to walk the hallways and see smiles on people's faces, the laughter, the oh no, or the all that sort of stuff. Seeing, there's a couple guys, Rich Franks and Jim Sketch, have been coming since Gary Con I. And then they start bringing their kids at like number two and 3, and I've seen them go from 5, 6, 7, in early teens, all the way up to adulthood. But I remember they ran their first all kids game at Gary Con IV, where Rich's kid for his brothers and Sketch's kids too, and they played, and they're all gamers. They're like I think they're either out of college or in college. At this point now, all of them. And they're still gamers. They're playing D&D and Dungeon Crawl Classics and this sort of stuff. So that's just amazing to see that, to hear and see the collaborations that come together at Gary Con and the other creative, the people that get together and make products. It's just and I've gotten to be friends with a whole bunch of people that I wouldn't have otherwise. And even reconnect with, guys like Larry Elmore and Jeff Easley, and just folks. I have a reason to call Tim Kask and Jim Ward, who are kind of like uncles. I just called both of them last week and chatted with them. I'll call up Larry sometimes if I need something, and we'll be on because if you talk to Larry Elmore, if you give him a call, you're going to be on the phone for about 45 minutes minimum, because he loves to talk. He's a great guy. No, I love Larry, and it's great because I want to talk to him for about 2 hours. But I was like, hey, I got to go. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, we're very understanding of that here on Wandering DMs, which I think began because Dan and I were like, "Do you want to talk again? Like, maybe we'll turn on the cameras this time when we talk."
It's funny. I do the same thing. I do what became Luke's Lounge. I don't know how. It's just not the most savvy name in the world, but I'm a California National Guardsman full time. That's what I do, and it's just been a heck of a past 12 months, right? You got the COVID stuff going on. There was civil unrest. There's wildland fires going everywhere. It was crazy year, and it's still a little bit crazy. Now we're doing vaccinations, right? But I'd be working long hours, right? And I'd get home, get off, I should say, about 8 o'clock at night. I'm like, man, I'd like to talk to somebody. I'd like to talk about some nerd stuff with people. And so I just got on Facebook and said, who wants to do a Zoom chat? Here's my, put the link out there, and then see who popped in, and we'd just chat. And I'd have a beer or something and talk to people. And people seemed to like that. And so I started trying to do it a little bit more regularly and put it on Twitch and have guests and stuff. But it's just the same thing, I just was just kind of bored, and not bored. I shouldn't say bored. I just missed that conversation, the socialization.
Yep.
I think that's been very much a part of all of our experience. And Paul and I have, been talking like you said, in the last 12 months about this unprecedented switch to online gaming. And I think I was just writing a couple weeks back, very much like you, Luke. 1 year ago, I didn't know how to run a game online. And I actually didn't even have any mental perspective to it. And now, if I think about running a game, all of a sudden, I'm not sure how to run a game live anymore. So what a huge switch it's been. And the other funny thing about this past year is as many calamities and problems that we've been dealing with, at the same time, D&D has exploded, right? Specifically to fill in that gap. And that's kind of been happening for a couple years. As it's become more visible online, and of course we know that, Luke, you're not an employee of Hasbro or the company that produces D&D now or anything like that. But it was just last week that Hasbro claimed that on a financial basis, this past year has been the biggest year financially for D&D of all time, and they're even going to have to restructure the whole company in order to handle that explosion of interest. And I'm wondering if you have, like, has that surprised you, or what do you think? I wish your father was still around to see that and comment about what his reaction would be to this unprecedented explosion of interest in D&D that's happening right now that we didn't see coming.
Yeah, I wish my father was still here as well. It's for some very different reasons, but no, it'd be great. I have thought that oftentimes as we've seen this uptick, because I don't know that he fully understood how impactful his game was. You know, because there was a time period there where it kind of had trailed off a bit between third, you know, kind of when fourth edition hit, and it was kind of wasn't very popular, right? And then fifth edition really picked it up, and I think he would have. I think he'd be very humbled and proud of his role in the D&D, and he'd probably enjoy some things about fifth edition, and then probably grumble about some other things. He was not a big fan of playing monsters as characters, so if everyone's playing drow this and that, he probably wouldn't care for that very much. I think, but you know, who knows? He changed over time, and his opinions changed over time. He stuck hard to the rules. I guess he wrote them. Well, some rules. You know, he didn't use weapon speed factor, but we did use like Melf. One of my characters, Melf, was an elf, and so I could only make it to seventh, eighth level fighter. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was ninth, but I could only make it so high, and then I had to raise my strength through magic up to 19 to be able to achieve, and wishes and tomes and all that to be able to elevate my level a little bit higher. So I think I had 19 strength, 19 intelligence, but I was maxed out at 11, 12. I think is what I ended up being. That was it. I could never get any higher. You know, so he was a little bit more structured in that sense. Whereas D&D 5th edition, very unstructured. They removed a lot of the wonkiness in playing. A wizard, right? A magic user is pretty weak at first level, right? But then they start hitting this power band when they get fireball and some of these other spells, and suddenly, they're pretty formidable, right? Whereas everybody in 5th edition has a longsword, right? The cantrip, so it's kind of equal. But he'd be amazed. I'm amazed. Did I see it coming? No, I didn't see it coming. I've seen it coming, and I'm not surprised that this year was a peak. Think about what was going on when D&D really fired off, right, in the late 70s. It was stagflation was going on. There was a lot of people feeling down about America. We thought capitalism was a dead system. Communism was people were purporting that communism was going to take over the world, and that was where it was going to be at. There was gas issue, gasoline problems. America was a rough place. We'd just come out of some tough racial tensions, and the Vietnam War wasn't that long ago. Jimmy Carter was in office. So it was tough times, right? And people didn't have a lot of money. And so in a sense, you could buy D&D and you could escape from reality. And it was pretty economical for the number of hours that you were able to get of enjoyment, able to get out of a $10 book, which is a lot of money, right? Back then. So similar kinds of things. We can't really travel as much, so we're a little bit limited there, but we do have this technology to reach out to people. Most people have a little bit more free time or less options for their free time, and so D&D is out there. It's a wonderful option. We have some amazing ambassadors who are demystifying it, and so I think that's why it's caught on.
Would you accept a guest appearance on Critical Role if offered that? Because I mean, it's 5th edition, right? It's 5th edition, but it's fairly prominent. So I'm wondering, like, if Critical Role came down and said, "Let's have a special guest slot for you, Luke," would you accept that, or would you say no, not acceptable?
Of course I would. I love those guys. I did. I mean, they are so nice. Are you kidding me? Their whole team is super welcoming. They've helped me out. So Matt Mercer's been a guest at Gary Con. He came just quietly, just so he could enjoy some gaming. The poor guy got mobbed there anyway. Oh. He's come on Founders and Legends and helped me. He's played with me there. The first Founders and Legends I did, this is just so I don't know, naive I am about things. So Gary Con got bigger, right? So Gary Con got bigger, and initially it was just a couple hundred people. We'd get together, we'd have food, we'd have some beers, we'd play some D&D. It was a great time to see old friends and family. And then suddenly it grew, and I had to work, and I tried to sit down for a game, and people were like, we need you to do this, we need you to do this. I didn't get to have, it was all work, right?
Yeah,
so there wasn't much fun. So I said, you know what, this is great. I love, it's rewarding, but I'm not getting like my game on. So maybe we need to go out around my dad's birthday and do some gaming with just my friends. And yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And so we're kind of spitballing it. Like, when can we do it? We'll do it in July here or there. Like, you know what? We could probably stream this. I was like, yeah, that can't be that hard. Let's stream it. So I talked to like Bart Carroll at Wizards, and talked to the Wizards guys, and Bart Carroll ended up helping me out and put me in touch with the Critical Role guys and got me a studio. They're like, yeah, you can use our studio. We just got a studio. So the first Founders and Legends was shot in their studio with their crew. Wow. I just paid them to do it. But I basically had 3 weeks to put it together because I had no idea. And I didn't ask anybody. I said, well, yeah, let's just stream, like, we're just doing one day, so let's just stream 12 hours. Do you know how much work that is to do a 12-hour stream?
Yeah.
Holy
If you'd asked us this 1 year ago, we would go, no, but we have a pretty good idea. And then when you ask us this today, the answer is, yeah, we know in spades. Yes, we do. It's a crap load of work.
It was like 16 hours, and we were just doing it live, going back to back. So Satine was the community manager for D&D, and Bart and her came out. And I had the whole crew, technical crew from Critical Role supported me in their studios. All I had to do was just cover up like the Critical Role stuff. So I had to put some tablecloths over some things and hung a Gary Con banner over where Matt was sitting. And then we just did it from there. So yeah, the Critical Role guys, super nice. Love those guys.
Awesome, awesome. I'm kind of curious. You talk about the growth of Gary Con. Is there, do you foresee that continuing over the years, or is there a cap? Are you going to keep it?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to cap it. I think that the more people that come is more people who are joining in the celebration of my father's life and his works. To be honest with you, he's not here any longer, but there are still a lot of these folks who are here. Jim Ward, Tim Cast, Mike Carr, people don't know, Tom Wam, Jeff Easley's, Larry, all these folks, they're still here. They're so important to us. Zeb Cook, very important to the foundation of D&D. And even some of the wargaming guys are still around. We talked about dice earlier. Uzaki was kind of the first guy to make dice in the U.S., right? He's still around. He's like 88, and he still comes to Gary Con and runs a booth. Sort of, hand to gun. He's great. But yeah, I've known Lou for like my entire life. And then Dave Wesley. Yeah. He's the guy who created Braunstein, which is the spark for Blackmore, right? And then David McGarry, who created Dungeon, the board game, which was actually I always thought Dungeon came out after D&D. Well, no, they were contemporaries. But he couldn't get Dungeon published for a long time, so it was contemporary. So he was one of Arneson's gamers playing Blackmore, and he's like, man, I want to play more, but I don't want to referee. That's what they called him back then. I don't want to referee, so he made a board and these cards to kind of be a referee-less game, and that was Dungeon. So Dave McGarry comes and runs Dungeon on Dave Arneson's ping pong table. We've got the Empire of the Petal Throne Foundation, for Professor M.A.R. Barker, made this beautiful world, very detailed world of Temical that you can play in. It was, again, created independent of D&D, but certainly at that same time period. So there's a whole historical aspect you can do it at Gary Con, but it can't grow any bigger. Lake Geneva has a town of 6,000, 7,000 people, maybe. We're in the biggest place. It's a resort town, so we're at the biggest place, the Grand Geneva Resort and Spa, and it is the site of Gen Con 10 in 1978, if memory serves me correctly. So it does have some history to gaming. It's about 10 minutes or less away from the last headquarters of TSR in Lake Geneva. There's all sorts of little artifacts there around the area. So it's the appropriate place. It's where I grew up. It's where D&D was written. It's where TSR started. So that's where it should be. And we can maybe get 3,000 people total if we use the entire campus, and that's about it. So other than spreading to satellite locations, which is possible, that presents a whole host of logistical challenges. About 3,000 is max. So virtual allows us to welcome other folks and still, enable people to gather and share in that camaraderie as well. And that's what I think is special about Gary Con. And of course, I'm biased. I mean, I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into Gary Con every year, along with a lot of other really good people who deserve recognition. The whole Gary Con staff. But yeah, there's a camaraderie around it. It's not. It came out of a family event. You talked about how my dad would respond to people and everything like that. I mean, I take time to go around and say, hey, how are you? Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. We try to do nice things. We have like a little pizza party on Wednesdays. So when you come get your badge, we just have pizza and beer that comes along. It's free. There's no expectation or anything else. We'll do like movie nights. We just try to give back and do fun things and encourage that sense of community. Games, you pay for the badge, and like 99.95% of the games don't cost anything more. There's a few that have some prizes or at a special location, so there's an additional fee. Very, very few. So you buy your badge, and you can play games, as many games as you want. The only thing that limits is availability. You generally have more than enough. And then, we don't want any empty seats. So if you just come to Gary Con and there is an empty seat at a table, we have like a red flag and a green flag. If the green flag is up on the pizza thing, on the little pizza stand or whatever, that means come on up, we have room, and we haven't gotten far enough into the adventure that you're still welcome to join in. And then a red is no, we're full, or we're already in the midst. There's no generic tickets. There's none of that. Just come up and play games. We don't want empty seats. We want you to have fun, and that's what it's about. So
that's great.
So come to Gary Con. Please come to Gary Con. Come if you can't get there for whatever reason. Come to virtual Gary Con. I think another reason, I'll be honest with you, I told you it's a town of 7,000 people. It's also an hour away from the nearest airport, right? So Milwaukee's an hour, O'Hare is about an hour and 15 minutes. There's no real bus or shuttle service that goes there. So if you want to come to Gary Con, you're either driving or you're flying into those spots, taking a taxi service, or renting a car to come to Gary Con. Yeah. So if you want to come, you are coming because you really want to.
That was certainly my experience the one year that Dan and I went. I remember racing because I was signed up for I think like a 6 p.m. Brownstein game with David Wesley.
Dave.
And I think that something happened in my flight where I was like a little delayed, and then I'm waiting there to get the car rental, and I just remember just tearing down the highway to get there in time. I think I barely managed to throw my stuff into my room and sit into the seat just in time for the game. It's definitely there's some effort. There's some effort to make it happen.
I will say that certainly among the, for me, among the most special elements of Gary Con is getting to actually rub shoulders with, all these people that were my heroes. The whole list that you just went through, Luke, is just like every single one of those persons is a personal hero of mine. And I was starstruck that they are, they're people, and they're perfectly willing to like hang out and chat about D&D. And like about David Wesley, I will point out, Paul, that he was watching this show on YouTube a couple weeks ago, and he left a comment that apparently, I believe I mispronounced his name, I believe. And so I believe if David's watching again, I believe I've been informed to very carefully say David Wesley.
That's correct.
Is the comment that he left that I'm going to honor as much as possible.
Excellent.
I think it's a Welsh name or something.
Understood. And we're trying to get him on the show. Frankly, if we could get David Wesley on the show, we would love to hear his observations of early gaming too. Sure. As far as Gary Con badges that you're talking about, Luke, the other benefit that I saw like this year is everybody that gets a badge of any level gets access to an adventure that you wrote that actually has content, I think, for Fantasy Grounds, virtual tabletop, I believe. Yeah. And I think you do something like that every year now, right?
Yes, yeah. So my dad always encouraged me to write and follow in his footsteps, doing stuff. I mean, come on. My dad was a relatively well-known person. Certainly, I would say famous in the gaming community, at least, right? I think that's fair to say. And growing up as a young man, you want to make your own identity a lot of times, right? So it used to bother me that people would be like, "Oh, Gary Gygax is your dad. You must be this and that." So it was kind of weird. So during that tumultuous time as a teenager, I fought with my dad just like lots of kids, right? He was my dad too, right? I mean, he's still my best friend growing up and stuff, but still, there's always tension. So I went my own way and joined the Army at 18, and kind of made my way that way to kind of separate who I was. And for some reason, I totally just lost my train of thought. I don't know. I don't know why I did that.
Well, that's an intense vein you just got on there. So I sympathize.
It was because I was like going back. I was like, oh man, these stupid arguments I had with my dad. I for those of you out there watching, if you did something like that, I think it's pretty common and it happens. It's like a ridiculous arguments with your parents over, And now as a parent myself, I'm like, okay, just wait till when you're a little older, you'll look back on this. It'll be okay. But I can't remember what the heck I was saying. I'm sorry.
Dan, I think
Paul and I have spent quite some time thinking about the difference, between adventures that you're writing for a long-running campaign versus something in a convention tournament situation with a limited amount of time. And in the past, Paul and I have spent a lot of time thinking about tournament scoring systems. And that, again, not being part of the convention scene in the 70s, it looks like they varied quite a lot in the early years. And we've been thinking about the best way to present a tournament scoring system. And I mean, there's this show that we caught on YouTube that's called The Big Bad. Excuse me. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's kind of interesting. And the two people running it spent quite a bit of time on the scoring system, and worked out okay. Not everybody was happy. Everybody's perfectly happy.
No, they didn't get. I think there were some serious issues, some flaws in that scoring system. Personally,
I don't know about that. But I'll respect your crazy opinion. So how do you approach, right? So when you make one of these tournament adventures, what's your approach now to the scoring system that makes you happy?
Yeah, so I knew where we were going with that. My dad wanted me to follow in his footsteps. I kind of wanted to make my own definition myself. I joined the Army. I didn't really do some of those things. But when I came back to it a little bit later in life, he encouraged me. My brother and I wrote Gax War in 2001. He helped us with that. He play tested. It was great. And then during Gary Con, it started getting a little bit bigger. And I'm like, well, is my time really best spent, doing the logistics of Gary Con? Or, wouldn't it be cool if I wrote a little module every year just to do a Gary Con tournament, right? Because I was thinking the Gen Con Open kind of tournament. And so I just dug in and started writing, and I asked Jim Ward to help me out. And so we just wrote a two-part series. We take a single elimination. We just pick the best team. And the things that, I'm not a math professor, math teacher, so I was a little bit more subjective probably than objective in my metric for it. But it's really, did all the characters, did you accomplish the goal? Did you make it to the end and successfully, figure out whatever the puzzle was, or did you get that far? Are all the players, how many players did you lose? How long did it take you? Did you bypass this thing that you could have, or did you kind of blunder stupidly through it? Those were more the aspects that we would look at. So typically, I want to put a time limit on things. I want to give them a chance to find a way around perhaps a difficult obstacle if they got some clues or hints that would show, oh, clever play, as opposed to just, smashing through it. And then how many survived? And you could also, did they use up the number of magic items or whatever that are there to help? Another thing is when people are playing, you don't want them to just have this experience where they get killed right away, right? Because then doesn't give a good playability. So you might give them some lifelines that they can use, but that might be, they had to use this. That's -5 or whatever. Just try to do a 1 to 100. So that's kind of how I've done it in the past. And then I would try to give a little rubric to the GMs and just let them note it and pick the best groups and we send them on, and whoever finishes and kills the bad guys or gets as close to it and makes these little similar type of check marks in part 2 would get the crown.
Great.
Yeah, we're writing one. We're ready.
I mean, I think it's a really fascinating play style, right? And it's weird how many years it took me to really see the difference between long-running campaign and, intense, time-limited tournament situation. I personally, when I first went to Gen Con, participated in the D&D Open at the time, I was like, this is the kind of gaming, this is hardcore and intense, and this is the kind of gaming, as a person who's very competitive and grew up doing competitive sports, is really interested in. Now, do you always publish those adventures after Gary Con, am I right? Those are publicly available?
Usually at Gary Con, and to be honest with you, it was, I don't think I've made money on these things. It costs more to put them together, and I usually print 100 or 200 and just sell them at Gary Con. It's a way to also raise money for charity. We'll take the number 1 and we'll put it up for charity. And my dad, supported charity in various forms. I think I signed him up for, I saw the Starving Kids in Africa thing or whatever, the children's fund, something like that. And so I got that information and made him, he supported some children that way. And also the Wounded Warrior Project, the Fisher House, things like that were important to him as well. So we support Wounded Warrior Project, Extra Life, which is Children's Hospital, and then I even started a 501c3 because somebody gave me money and I just didn't want to pay. Yeah, it's like, okay, fine, if you want me to dispense money to people, I want to have it in a 501c3. I want to have a board put together and do it the right way. So I started the Game Designers Initiative. And it's just fledgling. Of course, it started right during COVID, so we haven't had a chance to really gather money. But the purpose is, a lot of these guys, as you noted, they're guys, regular guys and girls, right, who happen to be working in the gaming industry and did some great stuff. But a lot of them, didn't make great money, don't have pensions, don't have medical, and so they can find themselves in some tough spots. And so my thought was, wouldn't this be nice if there's some unexpected medical bills or something that pops up, to be able to write a check for a few $1,000s, just to maybe help them for that temporarily until maybe some services can be found. So that was my purpose with that. But yeah, the tournament modules are great. I don't make a lot of money. I am for Gary Con 13, I'm putting the first 3, my Blighted Lands modules, I'm converting them to 5th edition and 1st edition, having re-edited and kind of laid out for a PDF format as opposed to just, I said print files or whatever, InDesign or whatever it was. And then we'll have those, and you're right. So every badge at Gary Con, the basic badge is $20. And with that comes 3 months of Fantasy Grounds, university free. Fantasy Grounds is converting my Loch Geneva module that I wrote with Jeff Talanian last year, Trouble in Loch Geneva, to fit Fantasy Grounds. That comes complimentary with your Fantasy Grounds. We have 7 days of the top tier of Tabletopia, which is another VTT, a board game VTT. And my friends at Frog Gods said, hey, we'll just kick in $20 of virtual swag for every badge as well. So I was like, okay, thanks. So nice. We've got, I think that's $50+ of perks when you purchase a $20 badge. And then our upper tier badges, they register a little bit early. We have enough games that I really don't think you need to really worry too much about when you register. We got plenty of games, but it does come with additional goodies, virtual digital swag from our sponsors. So our vendors, I was trying to figure out how can I give back to vendors, right? What can we do for them? And so we said, hey, throw us some digital swag that we'll bundle up and put in these badges. And we'll name Discord rooms after you where people go to game. And then when they come into the general room to get to their specific table, you can interact with them, or, in some way. And it's kind of like people walking past a booth. Because that's really hard. It's been a difficult thing. And I want these vendors to be here. When we are back to doing conventions, hopefully in this fall, right? I want to see all these small vendors and artists and stuff still there and not out of the business because this hiatus has killed them, and a lot of them get their business. So yeah, So that's the gig there, and like I said, the Astral badge is $50. You'll get like $100 of virtual swag from our vendor supporters, and then the Elemental badge is $150, and it comes with $300 of swag. And those, I mean, honestly, I found that a lot of people want to support Gary Con, want to make sure it's there, so I made a more expensive badge for them to be able to do so. Again, you register a little bit early. There's some events that are, primarily for those folks first. But again, in the spirit of Gary Con, if there's an empty seat, we're not going to turn people away. You come in, some exclusivity in some things, yeah, but if there's a seat at a table, I'd rather have it filled and not worry about what color badge you have, right?
Awesome. I love that you're experimenting with ways to give it that feeling of just community, of walking around a convention center. I feel like that's sort of the thing that I keep feeling like is missing from some of the virtual cons is that ability at the physical cons to just walk around and just sort of take it in and spot something unusual and go, oh, what the heck's that? I'm going to go pop in and take a look.
Isn't that the beauty of the convention? And you're 100% correct. And I'm not sure how we can do that. I looked at some software, some services that would kind of digitize your convention area and this sort of stuff. But I think the minimum was like $25,000 or $50,000. Like, well, I don't think I can do that, guys.
Yeah.
So no. So this is the best that we can do. But you're right. It's just not quite the same as being able to go up and shake a hand or give somebody a hug or walk through the exhibit hall and, oh, hey, what's that game? Talk to me about it. So in Discord, you can get that aspect because you can be like, oh, what's this game? I've just watched a 20-second video on it or whatever. Now I'm going to open up the video and we're going to chat in Discord about it, and they're going to show me about these things, and I think that works really well. And I had another friend of mine recommend to me that really, and I missed the boat, I think, for this Gary Con, but this could be done in future. It would be cool to have just in you could be in Twitch or even Discord, probably Twitch, advertise when artisans are doing their work, right? I think you could probably do it in Discord because you could have like 25 people in a Discord chat, video chat pretty easily. And you can see an artisan, like my friend Jerry Savage, he makes these really cool dragon pens. I think I have one. You may not be able to see it, but Savage Creations, if you're looking for Savage Creations, Jerry Savage is his name. So yeah, it's like this cool dragon pen, right? And it's really, really nice.
Wow.
And he can engrave them and do all this stuff. Yeah, and puts a little gem in the top. So it's really cool. And he hand works these, right? So you could see somebody doing leather work or making these sorts of things, and that would give people like to see that. And then they're like, oh wow, I have a connection with this thing. I would like to order one of those, and then they can do so. That's probably a way to help vendors out. But yeah, Jerry Savage, funny story here. I met him when he was about 16. I was probably 12. He was dating my sister Heidi for a little bit. And he'd come to the house to pick her up, and my dad was running D&D, on those nights. And he'd kind of peek in as they said goodbye. So they dated for like a couple weeks or something. It was high school, and then they broke up. But he asked my sister, "Hey, do you think I could play in your dad's D&D game?" And so that's how. So Sonny came in, and he was Urav the Savage. I think his highest stat is a 12. So it's terrible. But he went and adventured with Melf all through Saj Camp and Forgotten Temple of Thrisden and some other things. So Sonny played with us, and I'd play Fight in the Skies with him and other folks at his place. And, until he joined the Army. And then when he got out of the Army, I saw him. He was out of basic, I should have said. He was an infantryman. And I was like, oh, wow, Sonny's pretty cool. It sounds like a neat thing. So when and then he got out and he went to the reserves, and he said, hey, you should join the reserves, get some college money or whatever. So I went and talked to a recruiter, and I ended up getting talked into going active duty. And I thought I was going to do a 2-year enlistment. And I said, well, my friend was in the infantry. And they're like, oh, yeah, infantry. Well, no problem, buddy. My test scores were great. I could have done whatever. But they're like, oh, you want to go in the Army infantry? Sweet. I'll hook you right up, buddy. And so, yeah, 31 years later, I'm still in uniform, never had a break in service. I've always either been National Guard Reserve or active. So, Yeah, but that was thanks Sonny. Thanks, that's his fault. I know him as Sonny, but he's Jerry. His father was also Jerry, so he was Sonny to us, but everybody else calls him Jerry.
Wonderful work. Okay, so one thing I can't let go by that you just said there, and now we're going to have you back, Luke, and have a whole different discussion, because I kind of wanted to ask, like what adventuring locales you experienced with your father. And maybe the one thing I'm going to ask here is, if you played through the Thuristan adventure, did you get to the lowest level? Did you actually see Thuristan? Because that is really hard to do in that adventure.
Is that where we had to? Yeah, gosh, it was a long time ago, and I hadn't read it up on the shelf. But that's the other thing is, like, remember, a lot of these I played, but my dad he didn't let you look at them. You didn't get to see it. That was for the DM, right? You don't get to look stuff. But we put on the robes and had the thuribles and all that sort of stuff, and went down. Yeah, so I think we went all the way down there.
Crazy.
And
that is like, I read that, and that is really hard to do. I'm amazed that you managed to find that, because that's like incredibly hard. You must be a really good player. Is what I'm saying.
It depends. If you're watching, I'm playing Monday nights of 5e with the Idle Champions guys, and I'm just getting my butt handed to me. I had like some terrible die rolls. I was getting a gibbering mouth. That was horrible. So yeah, some days I'm on fire, and other days not so much. But I got to play Forgotten Temple of Thuristan. That was a great adventure. Thuristan's very scary. And I'll tell you what, Mike Merles brought back, tied in that adventure, if they have it like mislabeled, Wizards put it up. Again, it was Founders and Legends 1, but I think they call it Jox Machina. But if you do, was playing with Joe Manganello, Mike Merles was DMing, so go like Founders and Legends, Jox Machina, and you'll bring it up. It's not a Jox Machina. Sorry that they titled it that. But yeah, Joe was playing Archon, I was playing Melf. We had a whole bunch of other cool. TJ Storm was there. It was great. David Baxter from Legion. A lot of great players, and who all became very good friends of mine at this point. And Mike Merle's DMing it, and man, he ties. I'm pretty sure that's the Thuristan tied in there, and I'm trying to wrap up that adventure arc. We've done like 3 of them, but it's harder to get a hold. Joe's busier and busier, and it's hard to, with COVID and everything, get everybody together. But yeah, no, I love that, and I got to play a ton of those. My first character was a ranger who went through the G series and the D series, so got to play those. A lot of fun.
Awesome.
We'll probably need to have you back on to come up with as many details about that as you can, because I had a whole extra hour long list of questions just on that locale stuff in your experience. I will remind viewers, if you hadn't seen it before. So in the tournament, the online tournament that we had last year that we called the Big Bad, Luke was in episode 4 was it, Paul?
4, yeah.
I think. And one of our favorite episodes there, and our moderator William there was reminding us that when Luke first came on screen, you said, "Okay, gang, we need to put together and find out how many poles, ropes, sacks, mirrors, cloves of garlic, search for traps, listen for things, look for this." And just like all the classic, cover all the bases of all the classic D&D traps. And our viewers remember that is now referred to as the Gygax litany of like everything, every imaginable classic D&D trap that Luke was prepared for is now referred to as the Gygax litany, and that's now memorialized under that name. Just so you know, we adored your play in that so much. Yeah,
absolutely.
No, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, even if the results were rigged. It was a lot of fun to play. We know that Team Stefano was on top of it.
That was such a wonderful team, and folks show up in costume, and Anne had a song, and that was the only episode that any of that kind of crazy stuff happened. And it was many of our viewers were rooting for that team.
Definitely fan favorite.
It was a ton of fun, and obviously, I'm going to razz you guys because I'd like to win, but I had a great time. It was close, I'm sure. There's other great competitors out there, so you can't always win every time, and that's all right. But I want to tell you, the song part, that really does add another dimension to the game, and it's great. And I'm serious. Like Jason Charles Miller is DMing a 3-part series for Gary Con, the March to Gary Con. So the first one was last night. And then it'll be the 13th and the 20th at 6 p.m. Pacific on Gary Con Gaxmore, because we have several channels. So Twitch.tv, Gary Con Gaxmore. But man, he killed it, man. He was amazing. I can't say. I texted last night. I was like, dude, you are awesome. I couldn't believe it. So he not only does he do these great voices, so he's reading some of my material, based it in some of my worlds or whatever, but he was reading stuff I'd written. I was like, that's really good. And I was like, wait a second, I think I wrote that. And I was like, it just sounds so much good. I was like, wow, he's really good. This is genius stuff. And I'm like, oh wait, I wrote that, but he just made it sound really, really good. It was amazing. Then he threw in a bard and created a little song and played. I was like, there's genius. And the cast in that is fantastic. I want to give a shout out to all those guys. Vivid Vivka, Adriana, or Adriosa, I think is kind of Adriosa Gaming. Her handle, Abria Iyengar, B. Dave Walters, and Eric Campbell. Just all of them hit a home run. And I got to find a way to keep them together and do more adventures after this 3-part, because it was amazing.
Awesome. We are definitely running the clock now, so I'm gonna rein us in and ask guys, is there anything, Luke, about Gary Con that we missed that you want to make sure gets out there?
Just to say, we have lots of events. We're global. Please, wherever you are, wherever you're watching this, tell a friend, come with a friend, sign up for some games. You can get badges at play.garycon.com, and come join us. That's really my main message. Keep playing, keep the community strong. I know there's a lot of virtual stuff going on out there, but we'll be back together in person soon. Come shake some dice with us and have some fun.
Awesome. We will for sure have some links in the description text of this video to point you folks to Gary Con in case you missed it, as well as the streams, the Twitch channels that Luke was mentioning there. And I see that the Founders and Legends Jox Machina link has made its way into our chat, so thank you, Bucky, for putting that in there. So yeah, do check that out. And while you're there, also take a look in the text description for a link to our sponsor, Describe. That's describe.com/wandering, DSCRYB.com. Dan, what can our viewers find at Describe?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Paul. So Describe are professional writers of box text, and they provide professionally written, really interesting, esoteric, short descriptions for new things in your game to save you prep time if you're a DM. Descriptions of new locations or monsters or spells or magic items or things like that. And they also have a search facility, so if your players go completely off the rails, which we're in favor of, frankly, and we encourage, you can search up some brand new thing that you didn't know you needed before that on describe.com. And of course, if you go there and enter the code WANDERING, you'll get 10% off any order at the moment.
Excellent.
Again, that's Describe, DSCRYB.com, and there is a link in the chat currently and in the YouTube archive after the show.
Indeed.
I guess I should remember, maybe if there's new viewers here, I should remind them that they can like and follow and subscribe to our channel, Wandering DMs. We're here on YouTube, we're on Twitch, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on GitHub. We're probably on a couple other places that I made accounts for that I've forgotten at this point, but we do have the handle Wandering DMs on all of those sites, and we'd encourage you to follow it to see more content like this interview with Luke and all kinds of other wonderful special guests that we look forward to in the future.
Yep. And if you prefer, you can listen to this show in audio-only podcast format. That's available on our website at wanderingdms.com. Also through various podcast carriers such as Google Podcast and iTunes and Spotify. If you're listening to this on one of those carriers right now, please take a moment to rate and review us there on that site. That helps other folks on that site find us, and we really appreciate it.
We really do. I got to give out a big thanks to our patrons who support the Wandering DMs. We could not have special guests like Gary Gygax on the show without your generous help. And if you are in a position where you would like to join our generous patrons, please do visit patreon.com/wanderingdms. A couple clues about stuff that's coming up on our channel. Paul is back with a new 10 Dead Rats on Thursday. Our Wargaming show is off this Saturday, but we'll be back the week after that. Next week, look for our special guest, Mr. Ethan Gilsdorf, who is a writer and a lecturer, and he's written for the New York Times and the Boston Globe and Wired magazine and stuff like that. And about 10 years ago, he wrote a very influential book called Fantasy Freaks and Gaming Geeks. And we're going to have Ethan on next week to talk about the influence that that book has had and kind of a retrospective and look back at, again, the same kind of thing we were talking about, Luke, here today, about how incredibly surprised we've all been by the supernova of interest in D&D and role-playing games in the last 10 years that really none of us foresaw. Let me see. Is there anything else I'm forgetting, Paul?
I think that's about it.
Yeah. Enormous thanks to Luke. Thank you for your time today. We hope that Gary Con XIII is a huge success. Again, please visit play.garycon.com and look for the Gary Con Gaxmore channel on Twitch. And again, those links will be in our YouTube archives here. And I hope that's a huge success, Luke.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure talking to you guys. The time goes by too quickly, and I'd love to come back again and chat with you some more. Thanks.
Fantastic. We'll definitely do that. Don't forget, of course, we are live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time here on YouTube and Twitch. So please, we hope that you'll join us again next week for another thought-provoking discussion.
We'll see you then.